This is Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield, a podcast that resources parents, families, and friends with tools to have important conversations about mental and emotional health. This podcast is brought to you by Mayfield Counseling Centers, helping you find clarity, hope, and purpose. Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are really happy to be back with you, even in the midst of such a hard season.
It is hard is a good word. I don't know if it just fully describes the season.
Sure.
I don't know. It's interesting as we've talked about this a lot, and we just did that, mental health quarantine and that kind of stuff. But I'm just like, yes, it's been hard, but it's been good and hard.
Yeah. It's been hard, but there's been good that's come out of it.
Yeah. And it's not been that way for everybody.
No.
And I've had people tell me, like, it might have been good for you, but not for me.
Right.
And I want to kind of just validate the hard piece.
Yeah.
Because I think we've tried to be so glass half full type. And you and I are trying to be that way, and as counselors we're trying to be that way, and that kind of stuff. And that sometimes I think it dismisses, or can be dismissive, of people that are not in that good space.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think for me, you tell me what you think. I've worked a lot with clients where I've tried to challenge them that good and hard can go together.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's really come to fruition, or really solidified, or really kind of become tangible for me during this time.
Well, and I think something that really strikes me, and I mean, you know me, I'm kind of an overachiever and kind of a glutton for punishment. It's kind of just who I am.
Me too.
And so there's a way to look at this that's really beautiful, where we have been working so hard and so diligently at something that is not easy, and trying to find good out of it, and trying to find beauty in the midst of chaos. And now we're at the point where we're just tired of it. Like, we're sore, we're exhausted, we don't want to train anymore, we don't want to continue anymore, we don't want to do this anymore. Right. And I think that level of exhaustion and tiredness and weariness actually makes the finding the beauty more meaniful. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the masochistic part of me. Is that the right term?
Yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying, and I think really leaning into the struggle, because I don't know about you. I don't want to be the same person that I was before COVID, after COVID's over. Mm-hmm. And I'm done. Like, I feel like it's a senioritis. I feel like it's, it's the second semester of my senior year of high school or college where I'm like, what's the point?
Right.
Like, I know I'm graduating. I could fail all my classes this semester, and I'm going to still graduate with a 3.1 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's fine. It's digging deep and finding that motivation. Like, I'm going to just illuminate for those that are listening that, as counselors, we've got a great team. Mayfield Counseling we have amazing therapists. We've got 23, soon to be 24 therapists. Yep. We've got 8 interns. We've got a wonderful support staff, and we have done well during this time. We've adjusted, and we've rolled with the punches and all that kind of stuff. And I think all of us corporately yesterday was just like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not only Zoom fatigue, which is actually showing, signs that much time on the screen is bad, but my clients' issues are becoming heavier and heavier, and I'm trying my best not to take those on.
Yep.
I'm trying to be excited for my, and upbeat for my family, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And we're just tired.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's okay. And I think our American way of doing things is to say, that's not a big deal.
Right.
Like, just keep pushing.
Yeah. To invalidate the struggle and move on to something that is happier
or distracting, or pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just get over it. Yeah. Like, no, guys, like,
this really stinks.
Yeah, and I hate the phrase "get over it." I think I've told you this, and I've said this on the show before, that I've told my clients that if somebody tells you to get over it, to slap them.
It's a terror, because, and even like, if you change the wording a little bit to you will get through this, like, that is better.
It still sucks.
but it's still not what we need to be doing is validating like, yeah, this is really hard.
Yeah. Period.
End of sentence, send the letter. Yeah. Like that's it.
Yeah.
And we don't do that well because I think we've been trained like that there has to be something after that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you think two ways that we're going here. I think I've shared on the show that I'm working on my second book.
Yep.
And that's been really hard for me to find motivation and time to write.
Yeah.
It's due in like 2 months, so I'm like taking all next week off. And but as I've been looking through this, like what has made us as Americans and as Westerners, let's say, great in a democratic society, an entrepreneurial society, whatever, is that we have an independent spirit. We have this, I do it, pull myself up by my bootstraps, like don't cry, don't show any emotion, like get over it type of mentality. If you think about history sociologically, westward expansion, industrial revolution, all this kind of stuff.
It's pretty gritty.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
And it's not maybe the best.
Yeah.
Like as we see this now, because I think there's a lot of, okay, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus, but let's just say that there's a restaurant in Colorado that decided to open on Mother's Day because they didn't want to, they didn't want to continue to abide by the governor's suggestions. Like, okay, I get the mindset, like nobody's going to tell me what to do, but like on the other end, like it's kind of selfish and, so I think
what I hear too is we've talked about these two phrases before on this show, but I think they have new meaning for every new situation. And it's the difference between grit and resiliency. And I think the grit
or intelligence too.
Well, yeah.
Sorry.
The grit in my mind is very much that I'm going to bear down,
do what I got to do,
and do what I have to do.
Nobody's going to tell me what to do.
Make it through.
Right.
It's like I will not relent on my goals.
Right.
And there's so much value and merit to that. However, I think that there's a big difference between grit and resiliency. Whereas resiliency is, this is hard, I need to find a new way to operate that I can stay healthy in. It's more adaptable. It's more flexible. It looks at things like challenges that we're experiencing right now. And here's the thing. I think that a lot of the times we can rely on grit and think that it's resiliency. And so many of us, and I would probably include myself in this, have been working off of pure grit during this season. And now our grit has run out, and we need to pull on that reserve of resiliency that we have.
Well, I think our grit might have run out, and it can turn into stubbornness.
Yeah.
So so I think people going, I'm done with regulations. I'm going to open up my restaurant, and I don't care what people say. Okay, but have you thought through resiliency? Is thinking through the consequences, going, yeah, I understand where you're coming from. I get it. Validating it. It sucks. But if you go through with it, are you going to be able to open up in 2 weeks when the governor actually says, you can open up. It's time to open up. Here's the thing. Or are you now killing your chances?
Right.
Because now you're censored or again, we can debate this all the time, but I think it's for, and that was just an example, but I think a lot of us are in that same way. Like, I want to go see my friends.
Right.
I want to have people over for dinner.
Yeah. These needs have become stronger, and we have the option to give in to what may not be best for us in the long term, or to find a way to validate those feelings that we have and find ways to satisfy those needs. I think, we see this in counseling all the time.
Right.
When we go to somebody, when we have a client come in who is really deeply struggling with like addiction or just really negative behaviors or negative relationship patterns.
Sure.
If we dig deep enough, we'll find a core need that they're satisfying through these things. And right now, a lot of us have core needs that we know how to satisfy, but they seem inaccessible or disallowed right now.
Can't do it the same way we've always been doing it.
And so we need to find a way, how can I satisfy this core need? How can I satisfy this longing that I have in a way that is appropriate to this time? I think that as we learn that, that's a skill that will continue way past this.
Well, I think you're spot on. And I think as an example, like part of the reason we chose to do, Waffle Saturdays at our house is that every Saturday for the last 6-8 months, we would go to the Coffee Cup Cafe in Monument as a family. you know, and it's a kind of a dive breakfast restaurant place. Not dive bar, but like
dive bar breakfast place.
It's breakfast lunch, but it's, you know, you walk in,
Color
you're
me
like,
interested.
you walk in and you're like, okay, this is, you know, it's a dive, but it's really good breakfast, you know, and that was our routine that filled the need. Family time, getting out, supporting local business, all that kind of stuff. Well, we can't do that right now. And so we were trying to think of how to meet that need.
Yeah.
But I think we're all exhausted. And so I think my encouragement for listeners is like, how are you validating your own feelings? How are you validating the feelings of those in your family and those around you? Don't placate. But I think it makes, you know, we want to feel better. So if we see our family member struggling, our kid, our spouse, you know, mom, dad, aunt and uncle, grandparents, whatever, typical response, human response, and this is not a judgment, but typical human response is, I want to feel better.
Right.
So how can I make you feel better?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of just dismisses the need. And so, like, maybe the title of this podcast is "This Sucks."
Right. Yeah.
Like, because it does.
It does.
And
that's okay.
And that's okay. Period. Yeah.
I don't think we hear that enough.
No. It's okay not to be okay. And you and I say that all the time. Our team says that all the time. Like,
and I think maybe we need to add the caveat. It doesn't always feel okay to know that it's okay to not be okay. Can I say okay more times in a sentence?
Say that again.
Okay, so I think that cognitively we can recognize that it's okay to not be okay because that's normal human experience. Like that, we are not okay all the time. And that's fine.
Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Like that's acceptable. But I think that even if we're able to recognize that cognitively, emotionally, it still doesn't feel okay to not be okay.
No, and that's where I was working with a client a couple of weeks ago and just sitting there going through some grief, you know, in this time. And I said, grief is okay. Mm-hmm. Like don't do the typical American thing and, you know, should be gone next week.
It's a staple of humanity.
I said, your grief will never go away. And the client looked at me like, seriously, thanks, Doc.
So
you know, I really appreciate that. I said, no, because it happened. The event happened. Yeah. It's not going to go away. So like for COVID, like this is never going to go away. Why? Because COVID happened. The acuity will never go away, but the frequency will.
Yeah.
Right. So you think about it. Let me give an example on that. So think about, you know, I lost my grandpa 10 years ago, and I was really close with him. And you know, I can talk about him right now, and I'm good. But there are moments where, like, I really want to tell him something. Yeah. And the acuity of that grief comes flooding back for a minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I might cry or just get really sad. Mm-hmm. And that felt just like it did when I found out he died. Yeah. And then it goes away. And maybe it doesn't come back for another 6, 8, 10 months. Right. But when it happened, it was like every day. Right. Right. So I think for our listeners, like, to let yourself know that it's not okay to be, it's okay to be not okay. Yep. And it's not going to be this strong. Yeah. All the time or forever. Yeah. Yeah. I think even though it doesn't feel like it right now because it's taken so long, recognizing that there is going to be an end point for this experience can be a hopeful message. Yeah. And you mentioned something. We started a series in the midst of COVID called Mental Health Quarantine that we post on our Facebook and YouTube channel. Highly recommend. If you're not tired of us yet, highly recommend you go check it out. But you had mentioned something on this topic where you said hope is like sunshine, and it expands what we can see. Because right now in COVID, it feels like we're all fogged up. There's tunnel vision or whatever, yeah.
And so having the hope, just that little ray of sunlight that, yeah, there is going to be an endpoint. We don't know when that is, but there is going to be an endpoint. And there are other ways. When we get stuck in that tunnel vision, we talk about this with suicide frequently.
Sure, yeah.
Suicide has tunnel vision really, really hard.
Right, because you can only see your pain.
Yeah, and so you're stuck on suicide is the only option, and one of the best things we can do is offer alternatives and expand that vision. Yep. And so I think for us, we may be stuck in this tunnel vision of this is the one and only way that I can get my needs fulfilled. Right. And for us to get together with somebody that has insight into our lives and is able to hear us and understand what we're talking about and say, hey, have you thought about these ways that you might be able to fulfill that need? And some of us may lack those friends in our lives, and that's where,
counseling,
again,
paid friend.
Yep. Always gonna jump into that. You should expect it by now. But I think there's real value to somebody else being able to say, hey, you have this need for belonging, for friendship, for engagement with your peers. Let's dig down to that. Where else can we satisfy this? Right. What else can you do that is going to fit with where we are right now?
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think, so I just encourage you as you're listening to take a step back and to make a list of all the things that you're looking forward to.
Yeah.
Take a step back and list gratitude. What are things are you thankful for? And find ways to bless others.
Mm-hmm.
My way has always, one of the ways I love doing this, and it's anonymously, is to pay for the person behind me in the drive-through line. So, picked up Chick-fil-A for us this morning and was able to do that. It just feels good. Awesome. It's fun. But, find ways to bless. You've got neighbors around you maybe that are struggling. Have you thought about picking up groceries for them? Like when we start looking beyond our current and present circumstances, not to invalidate, not to dismiss, but to look at others, it so opens up our minds and our vision to taking care of other people.
Yeah, totally. Well, a little bit of a shorter conversation. Like we said, Mark and I are both feeling tired from the midst of COVID. We wish you the best. Sorry, apologize for my dog barking in the background. Just another consequence of COVID.
We're real.
We wish you the best. We hope that you are able to find ways to meet your needs in a way that is effective and appropriate to the times. And we want you to know from the bottom of our hearts and from the back of our brains, it's okay to not be okay. And what you're feeling right now is totally valid and justified. And that's it. That's okay. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for joining us on Candid Conversations. We are so glad that you were here today, and we hope that if something came up for you that piqued your interest or that you have more questions about, you feel the freedom to call Mayfield Counseling Centers. We're not just here for people in Colorado Springs. We want to help everybody we can. So if you have any questions, email us at candid@mayfieldcounseling.com, or you can check out our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page, where we post resources on a pretty consistent basis. We'd love to help you in whatever we can. Feel free to reach out.